Welcome to Conversations with Toy, a blogcast tackling life one episode at a time. This is the time to air out life's craziest moments. This space is all about speaking about life's hang-ups and ways in which we can leave better than when we started. Topics are all about ways we can find space to be better in life, love, mental space, and health.
Happy Friday. I hope that you have had the most amazing week because you are deserving. And as you go into the weekend, I hope that it's great as well. Thank you for tuning in to Conversations with Toy. I am Toy, your podcaster, but I wear a lot of hats. I am content creator, influencer, freelance writer, blogger. I do a lot, but the hats that I love the most is being a mom and a mom of 3 amazing children and a wife. And I am super glad that you are here. Thank you for rocking out with Conversations with Toy. We are doing so much better with being consistent. So as you can see, we have a new episode. I hope that you enjoyed last week's episode. We talked about this whole conversation around, is going no contact causing people to be more problematic? Because everyone who's on the other end of the no contact is seen as being selfish. And if you have ever had to go no contact, you understand that that is not something that you want to do. This week we have an amazing guest. I am super, super duper excited. So we have Pax Tandon, and she is an author, producer, and wellness coach and advocate, speaker, and teacher. Her award-winning book, Mindfulness Matters, which is out, you can get it now, has garnered acclaim and praise, including medals from the Coalition of Visionary Resources and the Independent Book Publishers Association. Pax has also produced a Mindfulness Matters short film, which she co-wrote, voiced, and starred in. I am super grateful to have her. She's extremely degreed, okay? We have conversations around who's degreed, who actually has a real degree. We're going to talk about that at the end of the episode as I do a rapid fire question with her. But she has minty, and I do mean minty degrees, okay? She has a master's degree in positive psychology. She has earned a BSc from the Wharton School and a BA in psychology from the College of University of Pennsylvania. She holds a certificate in applied positive psychology, a certificate in positive psychology coaching, and has 200 hours of yoga teacher training, certificates of training in past life regression therapy with Dr. Brian Weiss, and psychology safety through the Fearless organization. So when I say someone is degreed, these are the types of things that I want to see. These are the types of things that I want to read because we want to know who we're talking to. And what I love about Pax is that she's sharing her journey of what mindfulness means. We're going to have all these different conversations today. So I hope that you listen in because it's going to be a good one. And as always, everything is going to be clickable for you who may be tuning in for the first time. And if you're tuning in for the first time, please understand this is a podcast where, again, I talk about things that are happening in these internet streets, things that have to do with mindfulness and wellness, because the goal isn't to say that this is the standard. This is supposed to inspire. And so that's always have been the goal. That's always going to be the goal. And we talk about mental health and wellness because we are all in some way, shape, and form dealing with our own mental health. And mindfulness is something that we need to bring more into our lives. But sometimes we're not always inept to do so. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce to some and present to others, Miss Pax Tandon. As we discussed, we have Pax here today. We're going to have a great conversation. We're talking about mindfulness, and we're going to talk about what that means. Because everybody has their ideas of what it means for them, and that's great. But we want to know all the things when it comes to how we take care of ourselves and the way that we show up for ourselves, and just how we deal with life in general. Because life's for everyone. So, with that being said, Pax, thank you for joining with us on Conversations with Toy.
Thank you so much. It is so beautiful to be here.
So before we get started, can you just give us a quick, brief introduction of yourself? Really brief. We've already read your wonderful background. You are very much educated, talented, know what you're talking about. So just really quick, what do you want us to know?
That mindfulness matters. This is the title of my book. The title of my teen well-being program, in part, Mindfulness Matters for Teen Well-Being. And it's so titled because, as I have found along my journey, and thank you for those kind words, it's really just been a soul-led calling to explore what well-being is really about. And what I found on my journey personally was that mindfulness was at the foundation. So if we lay the groundwork for mindfulness in our lives, we can access mindful living, and I can talk a little bit more about what that means. Then we can layer on all of the other skills and tools in order to find higher and higher states of flourishing or well-being. But the mindfulness piece is, I think, the most important piece.
Let us get right into that conversation because my
Yeah.
first question was about, mindfulness has evolved, and especially in these last few years. How do you see mindfulness as we adapt to the pace, the pressure, and the digital overwhelming that people are experiencing, especially in this day and age? How do you see it as we evolve and how it's evolved in the last couple of years?
That is a great question, especially because you asked in the last couple of years, because things are changing, right? We can all feel it. A few years ago, I would have said mindfulness was the antidote.
Mm,
Now I'm going to say mindfulness is the coping mechanism. And this comes back to the mindfulness matters piece, like laying the foundation for that allows you to layer on all of the other well-being. But we haven't really done that for ourselves
mm,
as a collective. We're not being mindful. We're like the opposite of it. And so what has happened is we're just running on this baseline of anxiety, depression, mental overload, and all of the other sort of negative effects of the overwhelm that we're all feeling. And so in not laying that mindful groundwork when we had the opportunity, and by the way, like I think the pandemic was a huge opportunity. It was forced on us, so we took it. And what I'm finding is that we've gone right back to the same patterns. So where through the pandemic, we really understood what it felt like to be isolated, right? What it felt like to suffer loss. And we really found a way to connect as best as we could, like through Zoom and other online spaces. We haven't really integrated that awareness as I would have thought or liked. So, as of a few years ago, it could have been the antidote. And then we would have this like force field around us, protecting us from all of the ways in which we can suffer when we're not living mindfully. But now that is what's happening. We're suffering all the consequences of not being present to our lives, allowing all of this overstimulation and overwhelm to come in, and then it affects our mental health adversely, right? So we've got the anxiety and all the things, and we don't know how to manage it.
yeah, because a lot of it too is our digital footprint that we're using. So many of us now, young kids, especially teenagers, they're online. They're using some type of digital device. Some people have more digital devices than some adults, even as children. I know children who have two and three different devices, and I'm not here to argue parents' choices for that. What I'm saying is our our need to be so digitally involved. How do you feel like that has contributed? Because I feel like it has been such an uptick to, again, the lack of mindfulness and the way that we show up. And again, like you said, our mental health goes left because like you said, we're not mindful at all. We're just existing.
Exactly. I think that what the devices are doing are allowing us to escape. And mindfulness is the exact opposite. Mindfulness is being present to your life. Right? So if I were to give a definition just to kind of ground our listeners in some sort of awareness of this vague term, what is mindfulness? A non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. So the ability to be in the present moment with whatever is without resisting it, needing to change it, wanting to force something else on it. So a great example is just sitting and being bored, right? And we cannot tolerate that anymore. So we reach for the device or devices, whatever, and we're back to it. And that's kind of what I was alluding to before when I said the pandemic sort of forced us to be more present. And then, instead of taking that awareness and bringing it to our lives, making eye contact, with people in the grocery store line, or sitting like I went with my mom to an eye doctor appointment this morning. And, she laughed and even made the comment that everybody was on their phones. Everybody was in here. And so not engaging and not interacting. And on the way out, a woman sort of stopped us to remark to my mother that she was beautiful and that I was so blessed to be able to walk with her on this journey. I mean, it was really almost spiritual. I was like, where's this coming from? Like what higher force is downloading this message to me, because it really was on another level. And it's that level of interaction and engagement that is really living your life. And we're missing it because we're escaping. We're escaping our presence and our reality, and that's the biggest game of the devices. That is why they're so addictive beyond the dopamine hit, right? So you get a hit of dopamine, the happy chemical in your brain, when you check social and you have another like, or you check your text messages and you have an interaction, because we have a reward system in our brain around being validated, and we're validated by, likes and people in our world. What happens is we start getting so addicted to that cycle that we're not living in this reality anymore.
Right.
And that's really the danger, especially for children, because the younger you are when you have devices, and you're saying, like toddlers have more devices than I do. And their brains are being wired around the devices, right? At least us in our generation, we grew up some part of our lives without it. They, from the womb almost, are growing up with these devices, so their brains are developing and wiring around them, which is really dangerous, because so much of how we learn anything in life, how to communicate with each other, how to problem solve, we learn in groups. That's how we evolved. We learn in interacting with each other and figuring things out. The more we engage only with our phones, it's a one-way street of communication, really. We're not learning those skills, and then the brain hardwires around that reality and not this one. So then we wonder why kids are no longer really able to communicate, why they have all sorts of problems when it comes to interacting with each other. They can't do it in a healthy way. They're just lost and confused, and or don't have the social skills, so are getting aggressive or angry. That's on the rise.
That is true. I mean, I've seen more kids watch other people play a game than they're actually even playing the game. Like back in when I was a kid, they, video games were just starting, well, not just starting coming out, but they were big. And so, you would tell kids like, get off that game and go outside and play. And now they're not even doing that. They're also watching other people play the game. So they're not even playing the game. They're watching other people play a game.
It's
It's crazy.
wild. It's so wild. And what I would say, to parents especially, is that your children are looking to model all of their behaviors, especially before the age of 5, before they go to school. So it's really important even for parents to be super mindful that, yes, while it is so much easier, and I get this, right, to put the device in the kid's hand to get them to just chill out, be quiet for a few minutes, while mom or dad has the grocery shopping to do, or whatever other work, is calling for their attention. That's what starts to be sort of reinforced in the house, is that device is an escape, and you can use it anytime because mom and dad are using it, right? So it's really important that we model to them how to not do that. And that starts with not throwing the device in their hand to just kind of get them off our backs.
Right. And I like that. I also want to talk to you about this is, people have been using this phrase for a minute. This is not nothing new, but people are now more often saying it because we're so used to our devices. You'll hear people say, go touch grass. Go
Yeah.
touch grass. What is your thoughts around that? Because I mean, I love the concept because I like to be outdoors. I like to be active, and do all the things. But when you hear people say touch grass, what does that mean to you?
I take it very literally because there is a literal reason, right? That putting our bodies in the grass, feet, easiest way, hands, actually balances our ions. So there's a real reason why doing this is healthy for us. It balances us. In fact, this is particularly relevant to women. You know, we have a different level of hormone realities and fluctuations, especially in the perimenopausal years. So there's actually nice research that shows that, especially for us at that time of life, it can be very grounding and very balancing. So like literally touching grass like is really important for your health, but I think you alluded to this, even beyond the literal mechanism of touching grass balancing us out. Being in nature is super important for our well-being. We evolved for millions of years in nature. This modern world of concrete and glass and what have you is very recent on the scene, a few hundred years maximum. The majority of our time on this planet as we evolved was with nature. So we have an interaction with it that we've forgotten. But when we get back to it, you realize there's something very unique and soul-filling that happens to us. It's almost like we remember we're home. That's real. I feel like that every time I get into nature. I crave going for hikes and things like that. Yes, it's the fresh air. It's the sun, feeling the sun right on our skin. That's vitamin D. Light, grounding, right? Touching grass. There are some very real reasons that your body, your biofeedback will tell you need this. This is good for you. But I think there's also a very spiritual reason for it.
So let's talk about burnout recovery because again, we're talking about the ways in which we're doing things that are taking us further and further away from mindfulness because we haven't set that foundation. So you haven't set this foundation and now you're doing 2017 things and people are experiencing burnout and they're experiencing burnout in just across about everything that we do. We're talking about burnout from jobs, burnout from parenting, burnout from business, burnout from literally there's nothing people have not experienced burnout in. What are some of the ways that we can one, we know what it's like to experience it, but what are some ways that we can cut through that burnout so that we can recover and set our balances back to our mindfulness state? How can we do that?
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm going to answer that question directly as you asked it, and then we're kind of going to back in to the causes of burnout in the first place and how we can sort of remedy that for ourselves, which is going to be a big act of resistance in this modern world. But hey, we're here for it. Let's do it. So directly, how can we address burnout? I would say one of the best ways, the most impactful and the most accessible, to be honest, is to take half a day or a day, once every, what you can manage. I mean, I would say once a week, would be the best way to balance the overstimulation and overwhelm, because there's so much that you actually need that frequency. But okay, if you're like, Pax, like, please, you want me to like step back from all my devices and my world and get into nature, once a week? And that just sounds crazy to you? All right, I hear you. I feel you. Well, then once every 2 weeks, once a month, take one day. Even that will be a huge help in resetting your nervous system, your body, so that you can cope with all of this overstimulation. I'm going to tell you, just to hopefully motivate this experience, I just got back from a week-long silent mindfulness retreat. Okay, so I did 1 week, 7 days, no devices, no gadgets. I didn't even journal. The only book I read, maybe a couple of pages a night, was like yoga philosophy, like the highest, vibe. I was not filling my brain with anything that might take it off kilter. Only just trying to kind of help my mind stay focused and organized, right? But even then you could be purist and not read a book. And I would suggest that just because, if you're spending the time to practice steadying your mind, right, and emptying the container to fill up your cup, then I would say don't fill it with any junk food, right? Just be. And in doing that, it's also a really important practice in learning to be bored, learning to be with what is, and boredom's an interesting one because even the word inherently implies that like being a human being is not good enough. We've got to be a human doing. This is why we're where we are, right? Piling on all these things. There are so many beautiful things to see and do and experience in this world, yes, and we have to get better. And now here's the back door. We have to be our own policeman. We have to get better about putting the force field around us, the mindful force field, so that we're not letting it all in. That's the problem. Like we have gotten lost, completely like off base on our ability to be our own chief of police when it comes to self-care, right? So we're letting it all in. And then we let it all in and we burn out. We're like, uh-oh, no, why do I feel this crazy burnout? And the body is responding to it. The body is telling you with the levels of stress, anxiety, depression, what have you, signaling to you well before disease happens that there's an imbalance. We're just not good at paying attention anymore. So we let it ride and then we wake up one day and there's a real problem.
Absolutely. Now I have some rapid fire questions that I pre-prepared for you. So
Fire away. Let's do
let's
this.
go. Okay, what's one daily reset ritual that you swear by?
I stop, I breathe, and I just be, right? Human being, not human doing.
I love
So
that.
anytime you even feel like a little bit of a need, just stop, take one slow, deep breath in, let it go, just allow that peace for a moment, and then carry on.
Okay. What's a mental wellness trend that you actually think is helpful?
Oh, that's a really good one. And because I study wellness and practice all the things, that's actually a hard one. I've got like a whole buffet to choose from. Okay, mindful diet. If you're waking up first thing, and I mean mind diet too. So I'm gonna say, um, think about that globally, but specifically, first thing upon waking, do not reach for the phone. I say don't even have the phone by your bedside while you're learning how to do this. Keep it in the bathroom or whatever, because it's automatic for us now, right? So in order to tease that apart, start getting used to what it feels like to not reach for the phone, and just allow your nervous system to come online in a healthy way rather than flooding it first thing upon waking.
Okay, now the opposite of that, what's a trend you wish people would stop doing?
Mm. Okay, all of the supplements, right? All of the, oh, I've got the next big thing that's gonna cure it all. Whether that's honestly GLP-1s or that's peptides or that's, and these things get tricky because GLP-1s, there's some research, it seems to be helping people, but we have no idea what's coming down the pike in 10 years. That hasn't been studied. So, okay, peptides, whatever the new thing is, I'm just like, stop. Use food as your medicine first, so you don't need all these things later, right? Live a mindful, balanced lifestyle, and your body will be happy and not go into the imbalanced states that then tend to cause the burnout, that then tend to make us reach for the peptides or whatever the latest thing is. The cure, not the symptom. Go to the source.
I agree. What is your go-to nervous system regulation tool?
Nature. We spoke to this, and I'm going to bring it back around. Man, it is the easiest way for me to find my mellow. sitting in mindful practice for hours a day, because I just did that. I'm going to tell you, it's hard. That is hard work. It is so beyond worth it. There's nothing like it. There's nothing like the peace that you get when you learn to still your mind, and increase the space between your thoughts. There's nothing like that. And if we want a quick, getting it into nature, just looking at trees, research backed stuff this is, but I've personally found it to be true as well. It's very calming, very relaxing, very resetting.
Love that. What's one thing that Gen Z is getting right about mental health?
They're paying attention. I love this. They may not know exactly how to get themselves to the cure, but they are paying attention. And there's a mindfulness in their generation that I have not seen in generations before, across the board, whether it's their own health and well-being or the planet. So they're getting it. They need our help and assistance in making it stick, but they're aware. And I love that awareness. That's mindfulness. Like, they're noticing.
Now, the last rapid fire question is, what is the biggest myth about mindfulness that you want to debunk?
I mean, mindfulness, I feel, has like come and gone as far as the culture. It was a trend. It was all over the map some years ago on the cover of Time magazine. And now it's like, okay, what's the next story? But mindfulness is here to stay, should be here to stay, because that's our baseline. That's being present to this life is how it's supposed to be. So, okay, I don't care what other trends come and go. Mindfulness matters. Mindfulness is the thing that needs to stick around for the long haul, for eternity.
The last thing that I want to talk about before we end is community care. We are shifting from self-care to more community care. So how do you think collective healing, connection, and belonging are shaping the future of mental health and wellness?
It's everything. I think we got this during the pandemic, and I'm grateful for it on some levels, because it reminded us how important we are to each other when it comes to our mental health. Mental health was really eroded. It tanked in a lot of communities because we didn't have that connection and access point. And I will also say, speaking to mindfulness practices, I included mindfulness practices because these are practices we work in our mindfulness groups, right? So I include them under that umbrella. For example, sitting in a group of two, a dyad, and like practicing actually looking in each other's eyes, holding each other's gaze. It feels so awkward at first because we're not used to it. But after a time, you really start to see someone, and connect on a really human level. And then when you start sharing certain ideas, for example, I just read some great research out of Wharton, which is my alma mater, around how this practice and talking about, community, empathy, things like that, starts to just create more well-being in the pair. So it's really important, for us to be aware of how being in community affects our neuroscience, our mental health. And then again, not, oh, COVID's over, like we can forget about all that. No, sustain that important awareness, because it is the thing. Community is the thing.
Now, one more is you are sitting in wherever you're at, your office, however you're sitting, and you have all of your degrees and and all the things that you've earned,
My journey.
learned.
My
Yes.
journey.
But because there's been this story that has been going on, and we were hoping that it was going to stop, but it is not. What is your thought process around people who are not doing the work? They don't have necessarily the degrees, and not that you have to have a degree to talk about mindfulness, but when you have someone who is using those things as if they are the doctor of something, but they're really not. What is your thoughts around that?
Just like you said, there's a fine line there. I would never say that there's any level of education you need to serve others, to heal. And we have a built-in mechanism of integrity. You know it if you just pay attention not to how your mind may rationalize a choice or an action that you take, because our minds can rationalize anything, from homicide to whatever, right? We can rationalize our way out of anything, which is why these things happen. But there's an instinct that comes up within us that tells us, it's our integrity compass. And so you always know, if you stop, you take a little pause, right? And you listen for that awareness, you will know whether you are crossing a line. You'll know if you're out of your depth in how you're connecting with someone or communicating with them. And that's the moment to acknowledge the truth, and express that truth. If you feel like you're in an interaction and you've misrepresented yourself, to whatever degree got you to that place, it's never too late to stand up in integrity and say, you know what, this isn't something I'm skilled or trained for. And then help reroute that person to where they can get the help they really need. But just being responsible, to your energy and an integrity to how you show up in this world, that's the cure, not another degree or diploma, because there's always going to be some line, that could be crossed. Even then, you could have a PhD, MD, and you could still be crossing lines, right? And people do, that are not responsible. There we have to lean on our own internal awareness of right versus wrong.
Now, I know that you talked about nature being one of your tools that really grounds you in things that, when you're thinking about mindfulness. What are other ways in which you use self-care in your daily life, or however you bring it into? Because some things I do that are monthly, some things, that we do that are time-wise, but just in general, what is your self-care go-to outside of nature?
So mindfulness is a big one, and I'm going to say, just because, like, let's give everyone, including ourselves, permission to be human on this one. It's not easy. Even as a practitioner and a teacher, right? I just got back from this week-long experience, and it was so rejuvenating. I didn't want to come back to the world. It felt so good to not have all of the same demands on my attention, on my nervous system. And yet, it's not realistic or practical for the majority of us, or not what we want to be a monk, to be sitting in a monastery somewhere for the rest of our lives. So that is my favorite self-care, and it's one of the hardest to access, right? I mentioned, like, I took my mom to an eye doctor's appointment this morning. That's real. Like, the aging parents, the partners, the children, these demands on our attention are so real. So it's relatively easy for me to say, like, I can dip into mindfulness and practice it. But trust me, like, going in for a week, the reason it felt so good is because I could really get away. I could really retreat. Whereas in my daily life, sitting down to practice 30 minutes of mindfulness is like, oh my God, like, is it, because it feels so tough to access. So that is my favorite. I want to just give everyone listening, and myself too, license to recognize that it's not easy, but it's just about trying. It's just about dipping in, leaning in and trying to work the practice, right? Trying to just get your mind to be in a relaxed place for even 30 seconds or a minute is really useful.
And is there anything lastly that you would like to leave with the listeners who may be listening, that they're different stages of wherever they may be in their mindfulness practice? What is something you would like to leave for the people?
I love that question. And I'm saying the one thing I want to leave you with is, it is a practice. They don't call it a practice for no reason, because it takes practice. So, even if you sit down, you're new to this, or you're a veteran to this, and you sit down on a given day and it's like, my mind is just monkey, and it is not trying to come into my control. The fact that you sat is huge. and just give yourself 30 seconds, a minute. If that feels like more than you can even do, then that's enough. 30 seconds or a minute. And then as you continue on this journey, increase the time. As you get more versed in just being still, you'll see that no matter what the mind is doing on a given day, 30 or 45 minutes is okay. You can sit and you can be. And it's going to change day to day, and that's all right, because that's life. Life keeps evolving. It's not always going to be the sweetness I had in a week-long silent mindfulness retreat, and that's okay. Just sitting down to keep kind of leaning into the work is the practice. So it's all good.
Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank you for being a part of the Conversations with Toy family now. And for those who are listening, because you might be listening, doing all kinds of things. We're hoping that you're slowing down at some point, but you might be listening on this on the go, however. And if you're thinking, well, I don't remember hearing the website and I don't know where to go trust me, you already know if this is your first time tuning in that I will make everything clickable so that you can click on all the things, the website, the book, all of the things, so that if you need to get in contact with Pax, you can. So do not feel like you have to have it memorized. Remember, in the show notes, you can just click, and you'll be able to get onto the things. Because our goal, anytime we have any guests here, is for you to hear someone else's story, to hear what they're doing. And it's not because this is the quote unquote right way, but it's to inspire you to do what works best for you, and to also challenge you to show up better in your own spaces for wherever you are, and encourage people around you to do the same. So if you're listening to this, one, share this with someone else who may need to hear it. And then number two, again, take the journey that we're on, that is life, and make it better for yourselves by bringing in the things that you can to just make life just a little easier. And not because we don't want to simply just exist. We want to live well. And living well means we have to sometimes challenge ourselves to do better. So for all those who are listening, thank you so much for listening this week. And we will be back for.
All right. I think the episode went extremely well. I was extremely inspired. I hope that you are as well. Thank you so much for listening to Conversations with Toy. We'll be back next week. This week, I have the honor of celebrating my 14th wedding anniversary with my husband. So that is what we're going to be doing. But I hope, as I always say out of every podcast, is that you find at least one activity that is exclusively for you, something that you enjoy, that has nothing to do with your titles and all the errands that you have to run. I pray that you have so much peace. We will be back next week, and thank you for listening to Conversations with Toy. And as always, as I end, make sure that you share this episode with someone else. Share the podcast so other people can hear it. And thank you so much for being a great and faithful listener.
Thank you as always for joining me, and I know that even in the deepest or joyful conversations, that there's something we can learn and apply. Until next time, I hope that you are doing better. If not, we will be back to talk some more and handle it. Peace to you and yours. Stay grounded.